Blood-sucking moths. Everyone knows mosquitoes are bloodthirsty nuisances, but did you know there's a species of moth that also has a taste for blood? A type of moth studied by an entomologist in Siberia gave scientists a bit of a thrill when they witnessed the strange behavior of one particular moth. When one of the scientists held his hand out to catch the moth, it drilled its tongue through the scientist's skin and started drinking his blood. The moth, known as Calyptra thalictri, is a part of a European species that have been found in central and southern countries. But for some reason, the species has evolved, and instead of drinking the nectar from fruit, they have developed a taste for blood. Usually, moths and butterflies use their barbed tongues to pierce the tougher skins of fruit, but researchers now think the male moths drink blood and use the salt as a type of offering to their female counterparts when mating. How interesting. The belief is that the nutrients in the blood will result in larvae that can more easily thrive, with the female passing the sodium onto her eggs, which will get a boost of nutrients until the offspring are born. This is a unique skill for a moth to have. They're able to pierce extremely tough skin like elephants and buffalo, and it isn't a slow task either. They take their time penetrating the skin, rocking their stingers and heads back and forth to push their proboscis in deeper. Small hooks located on the side of the moth's proboscis open the moment they sense blood, anchoring it firmly, where they are able to suck blood for almost an hour. Only the males of the species drink blood though, and even though their bite is only painful and not dangerous, the thought of a moth landing on one's arm and feeding like a mosquito is a little unsettling to say the least.
Secret underwater alien base. Could a video of a mysterious object in the sky be evidence that aliens exist? A strange object seen flying through the clouds and then hovering motionless over Lake Erie is believed by some to be an alien craft. But could it be a scout ship that launched from an underwater alien base? A local philosopher and author of mysteries surrounding the Great Lakes in North America thinks so. Dr. Richard Sauter believes an alien base sits at the bottom of the lake that borders both the United States and Canada. And if locals are to be believed, alien aircraft have been spotted in the area for years. Multiple records of saucer-shaped crafts, unnatural beams of light, and other strange phenomena have come out of the Lake Erie region from multiple sources, with more than 20 credible sightings over the last 2 years. One video filmed by locals shows multiple objects hovering over the lake before merging into one. But it's the video recorded by a father and son team that offers the best view of what looks like an alien ship. The video shows a massive aircraft hovering over the surface of the lake, with the water beneath it shimmering as though the extreme force from the ship was causing a disturbance. The area has been given the nickname of the Cursed Triangle because there have been so many sightings over the years. Ships, planes, and even people have disappeared there. So what is it about Lake Erie that makes it such a hotbed for UFO activity? Until someone is able to get closer to one of these ships or divers can investigate the lake bed, we can only watch and wonder where those strange lights in the sky are coming from.
Poached tortoises in Madagascar. A house at the end of a street in Madagascar was hiding a secret, one that neighbors couldn't ignore. After officials were alerted to the horrendous smell coming out of the two-story home, they exposed the nasty surprise waiting for them inside. Over 10,000 tortoises had been hoarded and left in the house to fend for themselves, and they were everywhere, in the bathroom sink, the bathtub, in the kitchen sink, and piled on the floors and on every surface imaginable. The discovery was quite shocking to the police, but there was more to the story. Taking tortoises from the wild in Madagascar is illegal. Selling them is also banned in most countries, but the fact that they were all from a rare breed found only in Madagascar made everything that much worse. Whoever had taken the tortoises was in major trouble with the authorities. Sadly, 180 of the tortoises were dead when officers went to the home, and those that were alive were severely sick. Almost 600 more died from dehydration or infections within a week of being rescued. Even though selling the tortoises is illegal, poachers risk getting caught selling them locally for meat as well as to people in Southeast Asia and China. Given the number of tortoises found, experts were convinced they had stumbled into just one small part of a larger poaching operation.
Luckily, they arrested 3 people for this extreme case of animal hoarding, with the goal of tracking down the head of the operation to stop illegal poaching for good. Instead of releasing the surviving tortoises back into the wild, where they would probably be taken by other poachers, officials decided to keep them in captivity, where they would be protected and be able to live out the rest of their lives in peace.
Ancient fashion. Fashion has always been a way to express yourself, the colors you wear, the type style, even the jewelry. This was proven in 2008 when archaeologists discovered ancient snail shell beads in the Bismoun cave in Morocco. It took special uranium series dating to determine their age, but experts dated the beads to be around 150,000 years old. It's believed that the beads were worn the same way people today wear jewelry, as a way to decorate their clothing and to show their personal identity. Not all incredible historical discoveries have to be towering monuments or fossils, but they weren't only decorative. They show how even ancient people used fashion as a way to communicate their own personal style. When researchers took a closer look, they were able to see the shells had small holes that meant they could be worn as jewelry or even hung on strings or sewn into one's clothing. These beads were also found to come from 2 different snail species, making them even more unique. Even though similar beads have been found throughout northern and southern Africa, previous discoveries of similar beads are no older than 130,000 years. Anthropologists are now using the beads to study the evolution of human cognition and when language first appeared in ancient humans. This means the beads could provide clues about how early humans communicated at a time when there was no written language.
The Bog Mummy. More than 2,000 years ago, a man was buried in a peat bog in north-central Denmark. When his body was discovered in 1950, it was so well preserved that experts thought that he had been recently murdered, instead of dying between 405 and 380 BCE. But when researchers finally removed his body and were able to get a closer look, they found out the shocking truth of his vicious death. A leather noose was still tied around his neck when scientists examined his remains, and archaeologists think he was a victim of human sacrifice, a fate he faced in order to ensure fertility. It's also possible that he was sacrificed as part of a supernatural belief that the bog was a portal to another world. Scientists can thank the peat bog where Talltanic man was found for his remarkable preservation. High acidity, low oxygen, and the cold environment of the Danish bog all helped to keep his body from decomposing, giving experts a wealth of information about the man and his way of life. He was so well preserved that his last meal of porridge and fish was still in his stomach. They also found he was infected with 3 kinds of parasites from contaminated water or undercooked meat. Even though Talltanic man is a remarkable find, he isn't the first bog body to have ever been unearthed. Across Britain and Northern Europe, over 500 bodies from the Iron Age have been found in peat bogs, made from layers of dead moss. Bog bodies are the result of a fascinating scientific phenomenon that naturally mummifies bodies, making their hair and skin turn a leathery color. Clothes, slaughtered animals, and weapons have also been found submerged in peat bogs, but the discovery of bog bodies gives us a look into the strange burial practices of centuries-old humans.
The headless slugs of the deep sea. There are 2 breeds of sea slug that have a curious habit that has scientists scratching their heads. Both of the slugs have the ability to not only rip their own heads off, but they can then regenerate new bodies all in the span of a month. They were discovered by a Japanese scientist who was looking through her collection of sea slugs when she saw one of the slugs was missing its head. Shocked by the discovery, she noticed the head was still alive and was moving around the tank, eating algae. When she took a closer look, she saw telltale signs that the slug had actually ripped its own head off. Expecting the slug to die without a heart or any of its other important organs, the scientist was baffled when 3 weeks later, the slug had managed to regenerate its entire body. As researchers continued to study the slug, they found another species also purposefully decapitating itself to grow a new body. The reason? When the slugs are infected with internal parasites, they do what they can to save themselves. If that doesn't make your skin crawl, the idea that those headless bodies still live for months, reacting to stimuli before they finally start to decompose, might. This remarkable ability is just one example of how some of nature's most inventive species can regenerate their body parts and survive longer than scientists thought.
New underwater species. The sands of Egypt aren't the only place on the planet keeping secrets. Even the depths of the ocean still have stories to be told, and scientists working off the coast of Mexico have found a compelling one. While using an underwater robot to explore the depths of the Gulf of California, an international team of scientists found a space on the seafloor where searing hot water spews from 80-foot-tall mounds. Using ultra-high-definition videos to collect samples, the experts mapped out the seafloor using a torpedo-shaped robot. It was the only way to explore the dangerous thermal vents, with water that reaches up to 549 degrees Fahrenheit. But these underwater vents weren't the only spectacular find. New species of animals were also discovered at the Pescadero Basin, including one that really steals the spotlight. Apparently, these vents are a breeding ground for diverse organisms that are able to stand the heat. While one team of scientists focused on the geology and chemistry of the thermal vents, another honed in on the diverse organisms, and that's when things got interesting. Among 10 animal species that had never been observed in the Pescadero Basin before, they identified 6 potential new species of crustaceans, mollusks, roundworms, arrowworms, and bristleworms. Among these new creatures, blue scale worms, which have bright blue iridescent scales, were found around the vent, proving that even in the deepest, darkest depths of the ocean, there's something bright to be found.
Decorative Viking teeth. The discovery of decapitated skeletons shocked roadworkers in Dorset, England, who accidentally unearthed a 1,000-year-old burial pit. When researchers analyzed the remains, they found strange carvings in the teeth of the deceased. Each of the skeletons had horizontal lines filed into their teeth, a process that would have been excruciating for the recipient. 54 bodies and 51 skulls of young, fit men were discovered in a pit near Weymouth, each with slash marks across their necks. Other brutal injuries included hands and bones with slice marks, and leg bones and rib cages piled separately from the rest of the bodies. Archaeologists think the remains belonged to Viking warriors, and some think they had their teeth filed this way to intimidate those they met in battle, or to show off their status. The bodies were found near one of the oldest roads in England, known as the Ridgeway. It was used for thousands of years for ritual burials, long before the invaders were slaughtered by local Britons. At first, experts thought the Romans were to blame for the massacre, but radiocarbon dating pinpointed their arrival at around the 10th or early 11th centuries, which meant that the Vikings, who were considered a force to be reckoned with, suffered a devastating defeat in the village that saw their dead dismembered and buried in the pits. Why do you think the Vikings carved their teeth with these decorative lines? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already.
Tentacled snakes. Workers at the Smithsonian's National Zoo got a creepy surprise when a number of unusual baby snakes were born with small tentacles on their noses. Yikes. The zoo had been trying to breed the elusive species for years, but finally, 8 snakes from the Erupton tentaculatus species from Southeast Asia were born. Measuring only 20 to 35 inches, they are the only snakes with tentacles on their snouts. The little feeders come in handy when the snakes are hunting. After using their tails to steady themselves, the snakes twist themselves into a distinctive J shape. Using their half-centimeter long tentacles to sense vibrations in the water, they startle passing fish by moving a small part of their body. When their prey comes near, the snakes direct the fish toward their open jaws, a stealthy kill that keeps them happily fed. And it doesn't take long for them to learn this behavior either. After only a few hours of being born, the snakes at the National Zoo were already using their newly discovered skills to hunt. But scientists wanted to know more about their eating habits, like whether the snakes only use these tentacles to hunt or if their other senses played a part. One test involved putting the snakes in a special tank with a simulated fish at the bottom of the aquarium and then waiting to see if they could strike the fish without having any movement to alert them that the fish was there. A second test involved using infrared light, something the snakes can't see, to watch them as they hunted. In both cases, scientists realized the tentacles were key to hunting, allowing the snakes to catch fish even with their sense of sight taken away. Nerve activity in the snake's brains made it clear that their tentacle movements were coordinated with their sense of sight. This meant they had evolved to integrate their senses for a superpowered hunting skill that continues to baffle scientists.
Egypt's severed hands. Most archaeologists working in Egypt expect to find priceless works of art, ancient statues, and the occasional mummy or two. But during a recent excavation trip, a team working near an ancient Egyptian palace at the ancient city of Avaris were in for a shock when they uncovered 16 severed hands. But that wasn't even the most fascinating thing. All the hands were unnaturally large, and only right hands were found. So was it for macabre reasons? Were the victims brutalized for having massive hands? Or was there something else going on 3,600 years ago that made someone remove several human right hands? To figure out the reason for the gruesome discovery, experts looked at ancient Egyptian art and writings to find their answers. Tales exist of soldiers cutting off the right hand of an enemy as a symbol of removing their strength permanently. This practice wasn't just for the sake of brutality. Any soldier who did the deed was said to receive a bounty of gold in exchange for their sacrifice. Most of the hands were located in a pit outside the palace grounds in modern-day Tel el-Daba, but 2 were found in front of a throne room in an area that was controlled by invading Canaans who fought against the ruling Egyptian forces. So, were the hands gifted to the rulers by Egyptian soldiers seeking gold, or their enemies? Only researchers can find out who they belong to. Until then, experts continue to study the remains and scour historical records to see if they can determine who were the victims of this brutal act.
The bigfin squid, a previously unseen animal of the deep, was recently captured on camera, and it offers a spooky look into sea life lurking far beneath the ocean's surface. During an expedition in the Gulf of Mexico, researchers spotted a ghostly bigfin squid, one of less than 20 confirmed sightings of the cephalopod. While a team from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration were mapping the seafloor in the Western Atlantic Ocean, they set out to explore deep water areas that hadn't been explored before. As they were filming near a steep slope of the West Florida escarpment that separates the shallow coast from the much deeper Gulf of Mexico, they noticed something strange in the darkness. A pair of spindly blue legs appeared, and then 6 more, followed along with 2 tentacles, all covered with microscopic sticky suckers. As they continued to watch, scientists realized they had come across a bigfin squid. Would you have been excited or scared if you spotted a bigfin squid underwater? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our videos. These mystery squids with their heart-shaped fins are actually different from other squids, who use their tentacles differently than their arms. The bigfin, though, seems to use their tentacles as 2 extra arms, allowing their spaghetti-like appendages to float below them like a living spider web to capture plankton and crustaceans. They're also able to coil and retract their tentacles to keep them from being tangled. The bigfin squid are usually found very deep, around 8,000 feet beneath the ocean's surface. But for the scientists who have been glued to their screens watching these mysterious ocean dwellers drifting underwater, they see them as delicate, calming ghosts of the deep.
Europe's werewolf trials. We've all heard the stories of the witch trials that took hold of Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. But almost 200 years earlier, people on the other side of the world were persecuted for being vicious creatures. From the 15th to 17th centuries, European courts convicted men and some women of being werewolves, accusing them of mutilating and eating children. Like so many other cases of persecution, these werewolf trials started when superstition, religious beliefs, and political clashes inspired people to look for scapegoats to explain the hardships they were facing. The scary thing is how similar these trials were to the persecutions in Salem for witchcraft. Those seen as outsiders were accused of consorting with the devil. They were blamed for everything from crop failures to infertility and impotence, and those who were accused of attacking children were rounded up and tortured until they confessed, without real evidence that any of these people were actual werewolves. Their accusers seemed to believe old folktales of the mythological creature. For some reason, the people of the Middle Ages believed that animals wanted to consume them, and for whatever reason, they used that as an excuse to persecute their neighbors. Werewolf lore isn't only a modern thing. Stories of humans transforming into wolves goes as far back as 2100 BC. And there is even a Greek myth that Zeus was once fed human remains by King Lycaon, who Zeus later turned into a werewolf as punishment. When witch trials spread through Europe in the 1400s, hundreds of men and women were convicted and hanged after being accused of ruining crops. Some were also blamed for mutilating cattle after transforming into wolves. In the French Alps, where real wolves often preyed on livestock, prosecutions continued, with villagers being accused of being werewolves by their neighbors. Citizens often armed themselves with clubs and pikes to find, hunt, and kill the accused. In France alone, up to 30,000 people were executed over a 100-year span, showing how delusion and prejudice contributed to these unjust persecutions. What do you think inspired this mythological phenomenon across cultures? Tell us in the comments.
Australian mega spider. Funnel web spiders are some of the most dangerous spider species on Earth. So when an anonymous person donated one to a reptile park in Australia, zoo workers had to be extra careful when examining the small but deadly creature. Soon after receiving the spider, zoo staff realized their new resident was particularly lethal. Nicknamed the mega spider, this species has fangs that are powerful enough to bite through a human fingernail, and this one was massive compared to others of the same species. Most funnel webs are from about ½ an inch to 2 inches wide, but this one measured over 3 inches with almost 2-inch long curved fangs. Native to Eastern Australia, these spiders get their name from the shape of their webs that have a small funnel-shaped tube that leads into their silken burrow. It is perfect for trapping prey. And they use these funnels to perfection, waiting for beetles, cockroaches, and even small lizards to fall into their webs so they can rush out and grab them before taking them back to their lair to eat them. They're just as dangerous to humans too. Their bite is so toxic that it can kill an adult human within 15 minutes, which has made zoo workers that much more interested in finding out who mysteriously dropped off the spider with no labels or information about where it came from. Even though you might be wondering why the zoo would welcome the mega spider with open arms, remember that scientists have been working for decades to milk spiders using their venom to make anti-venom and save lives. So even though the female spider was one of the biggest species they'd ever received, the thought of which might give you nightmares, zoo staff welcomed the spider, adding it to their collection of 300 other funnel webs.
King Tut's space dagger. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs were worshipped as godlike figures, and one powerful ruler's legendary dagger might have been made from an out-of-this-world material. King Tut's tomb was filled with countless treasures that archaeologists are still working to understand, but a recent examination by researchers might shed some light on the origin of a 13-inch blade that some researchers think was made from a meteorite. Using an X-ray scanner to study the object, a team from the Egyptian Museum in Cairo decided to examine the blade. It was found buried with Tut's body and has an embossed handle with a crystal pommel and a golden sheath with the head of a jackal, feathers, and a floral pattern down the side. But it was the blade itself that gave researchers a thrill. The study confirmed that the iron dagger blade had high levels of nickel, cobalt, and phosphorus, at levels that showed it had been crafted from a meteorite found in 2000 in the Egyptian city of Marsa Matra. Clues to the origin of the blade can be found in ancient hieroglyphics. Egyptians wrote of iron that fell from the sky, which experts now think means the ancient people not only knew about meteorites, but they used them to craft precious objects, including Tut's infamous dagger. The night sky, the heavens, and the cosmos were all important symbols in ancient Egyptian culture, so it made sense that King Tut's artisans would have gathered the remnants of a fallen meteorite and crafted a dagger from it. They would have considered it a gift from the gods, the very gods that not only gave Tut his power, but watched over every Egyptian and blessed them with fertile crops and the rich Nile River. King Tut played an important part in Egypt's history, becoming a pharaoh at only 9 years old and ruling until he died at the age of 19. When archaeologist Howard Carter discovered Tut's tomb in 1922, he found a treasure trove of jewelry, sculptures, ritual objects, and the famed space dagger that researchers now think has meteoritic origins.
Man-eating sponge. California's Monterey Bay is home to many incredible creatures, but a new species spotted in the deep ocean waters off the coast has a bit of a nasty habit. Known as a harp sponge, the creature's candelabra shape isn't the strangest thing about it. The invertebrates are carnivores, using the barbed hooks that cover their branch-like limbs to snare crustaceans. But the carnage doesn't end there. After capturing their prey, harp sponges envelop the helpless creature in a thin membrane before they start to slowly digest them. They mostly stay in the soft, muddy sediment at the bottom of the ocean, using their branches to catch food. But when they were first discovered 20 years ago, most harp sponges only had 2 of these branches. Over time, they grew up to be 14 inches tall, giving them up to 6 of these appendages called veins to capture more prey. Even though their harp-like shape might make them look like some magical underwater creature, these meat eaters are dangerous and not shy about hunting.
Shang dynasty martyrs. Many powerful cultures around the world asked their followers to show their devotion. But for China's Shang dynasty, those who did so met a gruesome end. When experts set out to excavate the Yingzhou tomb, one of China's oldest and largest archaeological sites, they were stunned to find rows of bodies buried in tomb pits. As they worked to preserve the discovery, they found that more than 150 bodies had been buried there. As they continued to study the pits, they realized the site was a lot bigger than they originally thought. Almost 200 pits were uncovered, and up to 11,000 human skeletons were found. Corpses buried one on top of the other, stacked together or crisscrossed in piles. Even more startling, many of the bodies had been decapitated. As one of the earliest dynasties to rule China, the Shang brought in the Bronze Age from 1600 to 1046 BC. They were known for advancing mathematics, astronomy, artwork, and military technology. But this new discovery offered researchers a deeper look into the cost of living under the rule of the Shang dynasty. Bones unearthed at another site in the city of Anyang showed that prisoners of war were often used as slaves and later slaughtered. Sacrifice was common in their religion, but not all those who were killed were devotees. Sometimes large groups of slaves were killed simultaneously. With the king serving as a priest, he had authority over everyone in the kingdom, communicating with his ancestors for guidance and sending out hunting parties to round up primitive tribes he would later sacrifice. But the Shang dynasty couldn't last forever. Around 1046 BC, villagers rose up against King Dijin. Tired of his brutal treatment and atrocious torture of people, they called for an end to his rule. An opposing army took advantage of the turmoil by rounding up nearly 200,000 slaves, and along with the local army, they attacked. Many of Jin's soldiers refused to fight for him, and when some of his forces joined the other side to overthrow him, Jin committed suicide. It was a sad end to an oppressive leader, one whose influence can still be seen in the mass graves unearthed by researchers. But by finding the evidence of such atrocities, experts are able to understand the lasting effects of the dynasty and its brutal visions.
Killer slugs. Pure white with a full set of sharp teeth and no eyes to see. A bizarre species known as the albino ghost slug is terrorizing gardeners all across the UK, even making it into the caves of Turkey and Georgia. So how did a slug with no eyes make it into Western Europe when it has never been seen there before? Some scientists think their lack of eyes and ghostly color could be a clue. Many species that evolve underground without a lot of light have the same traits as the albino ghost slug, and because they were previously spotted in caves could be the proof researchers need to figure out how they got to the UK. The fact that they've spread into other areas where they have never been seen before is natural, but it's also a bit alarming, given how easy it's been for the alien species to work their way into the backyard gardens of various Britons. Ecologists think they may have hitched a ride in plant pots lurking in the soil, which unsuspecting gardeners then planted in their yards without knowing they were harboring the carnivorous slugs. Their blade-like teeth might not be a threat to the average human, but they are treacherous to earthworms. They can slither their flexible bodies into the smallest cracks, sucking in worms like spaghetti and slicing them with their blade-like teeth. But worms are vital to the ecosystem and the well-being of soil. So the next time you decide to do a little gardening, it might be wise to check your potted plants for these ghostly little meat eaters. But you might want to put on a pair of gardening gloves first. The coffin fish. Sometimes the most interesting species come to those who are willing to dive the deepest. When a team from the Smithsonian Institution's Deep Reef Observation Project were exploring the waters off Curacao, they were startled by a sea toad walking across the bottom of the ocean. Known as the coffin fish, the species has adapted a special fin that lets them take a bit of an underwater stroll, even though they'd previously found 2 other sea toad species in Central America earlier that year. Experts were excited at how different this one looked to the others. The discovery will allow scientists to compare all 3, giving them a first-hand look at how diverse different species in the same group can be. Making them even more unique, these sea toads are part of the anglerfish family. You might recognize that as a character from Finding Nemo. You know, the fish with the long spiny growth on the front of its face that it uses to lure unsuspecting prey. It's also possible that the strange-looking fish could be a previously unknown and unnamed species, but that didn't make it any easier to catch. When the team started the process of collecting the fish, it went on the offensive, filling itself with water as a type of defense mechanism to hold their breath for up to 4 minutes and ward off predators. But it isn't just for protection. Their ability to inflate their gill chambers also helps them to take in more oxygen, and even helps them to save energy when there isn't enough food around. Talk about multitasking. Thanks for watching. Which one of these strange discoveries shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like these. See you next time. Bye!